And we're live. Welcome everybody to the Smarp How to Write So That Your Employees Want to Read 5 Golden Rules live session. We see a lot of you joining in already. Glad to see such a big crowd joining us from the start. We have just about 800 people signed up, so we should have a pretty good session. Something that we like to do at the beginning of these sessions is just kind of get to know where people are calling in from. So if you look at your screen, you'll see a questions tab on the right-hand side. Feel free to write in there where you're calling in from. It's always nice to see where people are signing up from. And I can see people are already starting to do that. Great. So today I'm super excited to have 3 amazing speakers join us. It actually marks it's a really interesting session because we have a. I think I'm back. I just lost my internet for a second. But we have 3 great speakers here, and it's interesting because we have one kind of consultant or external communications consultant, one in-house IC person, and then we have a marketer talking about internal comms copywriting. That'll be interesting. But guys, thank you for joining us. It would be great if you could say a few words about yourselves as well as the organizations you work for or work with. And Kathryn, how about you go first?
Oh, hi. Thank you. Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's on the call. It's lovely to see so many people dialing in for it. It's great. So yes, I'm Kathryn Kneller and I run Internal Comms Mastery. I started my career in internal comms around 12 years ago and spent much of that time working in-house with major corporate brands like Nokia, HSBC, Vodafone, Britvic, and AstraZeneca before launching Internal Comms Mastery myself last year. And we are here to help internal communications professionals to do great work, make an impact in their organizations, and to build brilliant careers. We do that through training and coaching and consultancy. So yes, thank you very much for inviting me to join and share some tips.
Well, thanks, Kathryn. It's great to have you join us. All right, Maria, how about you? Some people might know the brand Heineken, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself as well as the organization you work with.
Of course, thanks, Alex. And same as Kathryn said, hello, everyone. Really nice to see you all in this virtual setting. My name is Maria. I am the Global Inclusion and Diversity Comms and Change Manager at Heineken. So some of you may know this brand. We're one of the world's largest brewers. We have over 85,000 employees in over 70 different markets. So we are really, let's say we have a global footprint. I've been working with the company for around 2 years now, always focused on internal communications and really focused on how we can engage our most important assets, so our staff. I have always worked within internal comms at Carlsberg Group, Nissan, Booking.com, and I'm based in Amsterdam, where I live with my cats, which is very important because you may see the cats come up behind me at some point. So I apologize in advance, and I hope you'll all say a meow to them. So thank you.
Thanks, Maria. And we're definitely looking forward to having those guest appearances. It's only right in this kind of age.
Right?
Of working. Yeah.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us. And last but not least, we have Mr. Bruno Bin. Bruno, I know a little bit about you, but maybe you can tell our audience.
Yeah. So first of all, great to be joining this session today. I see so many people calling literally from all over the world. So pretty exciting. My name is Bruno Bin. I am the CMO at Smarp. Smarp is an employee communications platform built for enterprise companies. We work with about 300 customers worldwide. We help our customers reach and engage all of their employees, and we do help them do that through timely and targeted communications in a variety of different channels. I am super excited about this. I've been waiting for weeks. There seems to be some kind of buzz around the session online. And I'm really happy to join Kathryn, Maria, and you, Alex, for this session, even though we are sitting in the same office. Yeah, I guess remote work life has kind of trained us to be in different rooms anyhow. But yeah, really excited to be joining today.
Yeah. Thanks, Bruno. Yeah, so of course, I'm Alex. I'll be your moderator today. I also work at Smarp in product marketing, so unfortunately, I do have to deal with Bruno on a daily basis. But we'll let that slide for this session. He has some good points to make. Just before we get into the first rule, I want to just a few housekeeping things. We will be presenting five golden rules. These are curated by our speakers here, so they're really great and really actionable. You can kind of take home and level up your copywriting in your respective organizations. We have reserved 15 minutes at the end for Q&A, but with these sessions, what ends up happening is you can we start taking questions during each rule or each segment. So feel free to put in your questions at any time in that same tab you've been writing your call-in locations from. So great, and as Bruno said, great to see. Right now I'm seeing India, UK, Tokyo, Canada. So yeah, we have a pretty good spread. All right, but with that, I think we can go ahead and get into the very first rule. And this rule, I actually, if we're connected on LinkedIn, I kind of spoiled it a little bit earlier today when I was talking about the session. So the first rule goes that attention is earned. So I won't get too deep into it, but essentially, just the fact that your employees work in the same organization as you do doesn't mean that they necessarily have to read all the messages you send them. So kind of you have to earn that attention and make sure that they want to read it. So Bruno, maybe you can kick us off with this rule.
Yeah, I think you summarized it pretty well there. But to me, when I think of this rule, the first thing that comes to mind is that, and the way I like to think about attention is earned, is that every line is your last chance. When you're trying to write so that people read, and that you get your message through, most importantly, you have to remember that every line is your last chance. And what I mean by that is, I don't know, let's say you're writing an email, for example, right? You might write the best email in the world, the best email ever written. If the subject line doesn't get them to open the email, it's worth nothing. I see, I think it's a normal inclination to kind of leave the best for last when you're writing. But to me, when you're trying to be read, it's really important to think about this rule. And whether it's, a type of blog post or print headline, headlines, the goal of the headline is to get people to catch their attention and get them to the first paragraph, first sentence. The goal of the first sentence is to get them to the second sentence, you want to get them to the third. And I think that the only way to really get better at this is by doing it. For anyone who is connected with me on LinkedIn, you probably notice I post about once a day. And one of the reasons why I do that is for copywriting. It's been such an amazing tool to help me understand what triggers people, how to word ideas and messages in a way that catches and grabs people's attentions. One of the things that, or a couple of things that I picked up along the way that maybe I could share would be to avoid blind headlines when you're trying to capture attention. What are blind headlines? It's in essence a headline that requires you to read the rest of the message to understand it. So for example, let's say your headline is "The sky is blue," right? You could be talking about a car with a sunroof, or you could be talking about an airline's summer deals coming up. But the point is, the person getting that, some may argue that you might click on that because you're curious, but personally, I don't think that's a good thing. It probably won't deliver on their expectations when they get to the message, which doesn't do very well. So avoid blind headlines. Make sure that it's crystal clear what you're talking about. And then the second thing would be to appeal to people's self-interest. We are all human. It plays a part. So if I want to give you a practical example, what I mean by that, it would be I don't know, talking about this webinar. And I think many things of how we promoted the session can be applied as like basic examples, right? But instead of saying our webinar is happening tomorrow, you could flip that into your peers are joining the webinar tomorrow, are you? For one, it's actionable, it's a question, but also it does play into the emotional side of things, right? Like you may think maybe fear of missing out, or my peers are joining, maybe they'll be talking about it tomorrow, and I'll be out of the loop. But for sure, the best way to get better at this is practice. Write as much as you can. Like I said, LinkedIn for me has been a great tool for that. And resist the urge to write for anything other than to be understood and to get your message across. Like leave your ego out the door. You might have a bunch of creative ideas on how you're telling this message, this story, but if you want to get read, get to the point.
Perfect. Thanks. Thanks, Bruno, for outlining that. Now that we've kind of heard this, and of course, a lot of these examples are applicable to whether you're writing for an external audience or an internal audience. Now that we've kind of heard it from the mouth of a marketer, how about Kathryn and Maria? What do you guys think on the internal side?
So I think
No, go ahead.
Thank you, Kathryn. I couldn't agree more. I think attention is definitely earned, and in the landscape of internal comms, there's definitely a fight for space and a fight for attention. So taking Bruno's point one step further, when looking at the channels that you use, for example, let's say you're using Facebook at workplace, it's also good to keep in mind that you physically want your key takeaway to be in the first or second sentence, so that the person doesn't actually have to click to see more. So that if they scroll over your content, they can see right away what the takeaway is. And I think that's very important, because we often get caught up in writing really nice things, and like you said, Bruno, you go from one to the next to the third, and then you have your key takeaway at the end. But most people aren't even going to read your full message. So make sure that it's really visible at the top.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with both of them. I think it's really important for internal communicators to master the skill of copywriting, and there's loads of technical stuff that internal communicators can learn from the marketing discipline about how to structure, how to use language, and really that idea of thinking like a marketer and saying, look, we've got to fight for employees' attention. And in some ways, we've almost got to fight harder, particularly with email. And the reason why I say that is that kind of the overall goal for most employees, and they may not even have realized this for themselves, is actually they want stuff out of their inbox as soon as possible. So if they can hit delete on something that comes from internal comms and not feel bad about it, then they will. And they'll be like, if it's important, it will reach me another way. So you have to overcome that barrier and not be... I don't think internal communicators, as a general rule, do this, but you've got to avoid that sense of entitlement, which says that, oh, well, because it's coming from internal comms, people are going to read it, because they will treat it like any other email that they receive. So it's got to be relevant, it's got to be valuable, it's got to kind of speak to a kind of a problem or a need that they have. I think another really interesting thing about internal comms is the number of different modes of writing that internal communicators have to master and have to switch between. So for example, we have to write like journalists if we're writing internal news stories. We have to write like direct marketers if we're writing emails that are encouraging people to do something. We need to write like bloggers or like social media experts, depending on the channel that we're doing. So the more that you can learn about really how to technically structure a message and how to work within those parameters is really important. But ultimately, whatever you're writing, if you can be interesting and be kind, that will take you 80% of the way and take you to where you need to go.
That's that's really good. Be interesting and be kind. Really good rules of thumb.
Kathryn, I think that was a really interesting point that you mentioned there. Sorry, I lost my connection a little bit. I have the worst luck with these sessions. My internet just never helps. But you said if it's important, it will reach me anyway. That employees kind of ignore the messages and have this attitude, and that's something that I know I've spent a lot of time talking with Alex about, which is technology has changed us in such a profound way. And, you know, we have these things, mine is nearby, I don't know about you, but we've kind of learned that if something is important, it will reach us one way or another, right? You go to your social media, it learns what you care about based on how you interact with things. The more you use it, the more relevant and targeted it becomes. If you have your news app, it's gonna kind of make sure that based on where you are and whatnot, target you with information. Maybe we'll push notifications to you. Your friends and family will reach you on your messaging app, WhatsApp, whatever it is. We have grown accustomed to that idea. So to me, it's super important to understand that it's much easier to mimic the behavior that employees already have in their personal lives than trying to create new ones. Like I see a lot of companies making a decision in top executive level on, you know, where things are communicated. And well, guess what? The same way that they don't have to read your messages, you don't get to choose that. They are going to be where they want to be, and that's how we are these days.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think there's I really wanted to, and I know we should already be moving on to rule two, but there's such a great question by Kriti, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, in the audience about kind of dealing with the multi-generational workforce. So do you guys have any kind of insight into this, where if you're dealing with a multi-generational workforce, how do you write effectively to catch the attention of multiple different age groups? Which is, I mean, for a large organization, that's definitely a huge issue because you have a multi-generational workforce. Do you guys have any insight on that?
Yeah, so I think this goes to, you know, us looking at the channels that we use and how we use those channels as well. So, you know, Kathryn, you mentioned email, which is a very, let's say, traditional form of corporate messaging, right? And certain people will consume that email in the way you'd like them to. They will read the whole thing, they will click the attachment, everything is fine. But there are other people, like you said, Bruno, who are waiting for their WhatsApp to come through, and that's how they're going to be told this information. So I think what's really important is going back to that marketing idea that you create personas for your internal people. Yes. And you look at these personas and you say, okay, our sales force in this area, in this country, have a specific need. This is how we're going to target them, because people are on the road. Let's say they're salespeople. They're not going to be reading their emails. They're going to be checking their app or whatever it is. So you could potentially use WhatsApp as a way of gathering their attention, where as opposed to, let's say you have someone working in a plant or a brewery who has no access to the same technology. Again, email is not going to be the way to go. You might want to use a supervisor briefing. So you really want to think about it in like an overarching, marketing strategy, and look at all the different people you have, where they are and what their needs are, and then define it like that. So I think it's safe to say it's not one size fits all.
I mean, if we've got a minute or two for me to weigh in, it's kind of interesting because I kind of come at the question from a slightly different angle to Maria. And what I mean by that is that it's very tempting for internal comms or for any organization to kind of want to chase after new things and to be like, hey, we need a TikTok video, we need a this, we need a that, because that's where the kids are. And it can kind of feel like your parents trying to be a bit cool, and kind of if you try too hard, then you can actually come across as a bit cringy. And you kind of think, well, actually we've got a multi-generational workforce. If we're a global organization, we've got a geographically diverse workforce, and words that mean one thing in one place are going to mean something in something else. So unless you have an unlimited amount of resources to kind of cater very specifically to understand each audience and to know them, I said most internal communicators don't have that luxury. So as a rule of thumb, I would kind of say, look, as long as you're being interesting and you're being kind and you're looking at what your multi-generational workforce actually has in common, which is probably things like they want to do a great job, they want to trust the company, they want to feel like they're investing their time and their effort in the right place. As long as you keep those things in mind, you will never hit everybody the right way, but you will get most of them if you are just human and authentic and genuine.
Right. Really good rule of thumb. But I think, we it seems like we could have a whole webinar based on this rule alone.
Yeah.
So I think in the interest of time, let's move on to the second one. And it's interesting because you guys were already talking a little bit, kind of alluding to this a little bit during this rule. But the second rule goes, the medium is the message. And now there's so many ways to think about the medium of your internal communications, whether that's, the actual channel you're sending it on, whether it's an email, an app, an intranet, for example, or it's the content type. Is it a video? Is it written? So Kathryn, maybe I know you've been very passionate about this topic. You were just talking about TikTok. Maybe you want to kick us off with this rule.
Yeah, sure. So it always sounds like a slightly cryptic statement, but I guess what we really mean by the medium is the message is that with every piece of communication, you've kind of got the content, you've got the message that you're putting out that you want people to know, but it's easy to forget that the medium actually sends a lot of other subtle messages about kind of the business or about communications or how communications sees employees. And, a lot of these kind of subconscious cues come from it. So although this is a webinar about, how to write great emails, I think the golden rule for me here is actually before you pick up a pen or before you start typing, actually think through what, is writing the correct medium for whatever it is that I have to say? Would it be better spoken, either in a presentation by a meeting or a video from your CEO? What are the kind of why would we write it? And if you decide that actually it does need to be written because it's going to need to be referred to in the past or whatever, then if it does need to be written, then should it be in an email? Should it be in an intranet post? Should it be on internal social media? What should it do, and kind of what are the implications of posting it on that channel? And then if you kind of say, okay, it's got to be in an email, then actually what decisions are you making about the style of writing, and what decisions are you making about the tone of voice that you're using? So I've worked a lot with big consumer brands over the course of my career, and where you have big consumer brands, you have strong, well-resourced marketing departments and very clear brand guidelines, and they will almost certainly have a tone of voice document or a house style. And so it's really, really important for internal communicators to talk to the marketing department. I mean, many of you will have done this already, and it'll be part of the way you work. But I remember when I found out about it, and it like a light went on for me, which is get hold of the tone of voice guidelines and actually speak in the same voice to your employees as your company speaks to its customers or consumers, because ultimately your customers and consumers are spending their money with your company, but your employees are spending their time and their talents and their efforts with your companies. And so you need to kind of think of them in a similar way. And one good example from a previous company that I worked for of just kind of how the medium sends some really kind of subtle but important messages is that the CEO used to send out an email every time there was a new product launch or there was quarterly business results or anything that was worthy of an email from the CEO. And the company invested in a major social media platform. And he made the decision that from that point on, that all his business review updates, all his launches, everything that he said to his employees would go out on the social media platform, and that they would stop sending them by email. And so the content of those messages was exactly the same, but it sent a very powerful message that it was a modern company that was moving to social, that was moving away from all staff emails, and that senior leadership would really have no choice but to fall in line and adopt that platform as well. If it was good enough for the CEO, it was good enough for everybody else. So it's just that idea of think before you even pick up a pen, think about what it is think about the messages that your employees will pick up from your choice of medium or channel or the style or the tone of voice that you're using.
I actually have a really good, if I can weigh in, Alex, and if my internet allows me. But I actually have a really good real life example similar to what Kathryn was saying. I once was working at a large corporation, and I remember, my first month, I got the company email newsletter, the monthly email newsletter that they would send to 26 different countries. Every employee got the same one-size-fits-all. And I was new, so I took the time to read the entire thing, just telling me all sorts of things about the company globally. It was telling me a lot of local information from different offices, countries. It's telling me about people being promoted who I never even met. But I read the whole thing because I was new. And then at the end, I realized that maybe, I have enough work to do as is. So the second month, I read a little less, and 6 months down the road, I kind of didn't really read it ever again, just deleted it. So I guess there's a question actually that I saw from Agatha saying how you regain the attention of employees that was lost. So people are ignoring your messages because of their past experience. How do you win them back? I would say that's a long, hard road. That's the truth. If I think of myself in that situation, that's not an easy thing to do. Like if you keep doing the one-size-fits-all approach to me, you're gonna manage to alienate your employees pretty quickly, and coming back from that is hard. But I understand that's the reality in many companies. So to me, the answer to that is, the sooner you start changing things around, changing that approach, understand your internal audiences, talk to them, deliver, the right content format, the right channels, and the information that is actually relevant to the individual, and then over time you can regain their attention. But I don't think there is a magic answer to that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that, Bruno. I mean, I think the key is finding out kind of why they've lost interest to begin with. It's either what you're communicating isn't relevant, or the way you're communicating it isn't cutting through. So it could be content, it could be skills. My recommendation would be to dig into that a little bit deeper, first of all, and to kind of go and talk to some employees and say, listen, clearly something's not working. Off the record, tell me what's going on so we can improve. Most employees will want to kind of come back, and I'm sure they'll be very helpful in terms of giving you some guidance.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I wanted to just give a really quick example of this being put into practice. So a few years ago, I launched an internal comms app across Europe, and that also, I believe, kind of will cover the question from Jan around talking to highly disengaged workforces. So we were launching an app to plant-based staff. So it was a car company. So plant-based staff and office-based staff. And the people in the plants have a completely different reality. They weren't disengaged as such, but they had no connection with corporate, and they didn't care about corporate. So we really had to figure out a way to contact them, communicate with them, and make them care. So we came up with something called the 3 C's of content. The first C was corporate, right? So we had an app. This app had to have corporate information, because otherwise you're not going to get budget. You're not going to be able to launch it, right? So we knew we were going to get the corporate messaging across them. And we had competitions, because we knew, especially in places like Sunderland and Barcelona, that these are a lot of guys who are interested in football, these types of things. So we attracted them with competitions. And finally, we used curry vouchers. So in Sunderland, at the plant there, we had a very low uptake of people actually downloading the app, and they had no incentive to do it. So what we did was we worked with the canteen, and we had curry vouchers put in the canteen. So every time you went to lunch, if you showed that you had downloaded the app, you would get a curry voucher. And that meant that our uptake went from like 20% to 70% in about a month, because everyone wanted a chicken curry. And I think that's a really funny example of how you can really take the knowledge about your audience and target it. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So think like a marketer and go to where your audience already is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was expecting like 4 P's of, or like the 4 P's of marketing strategy or whatever, like a really kind of textbook example. And it's just corporate competitions and curry. I love that.
I love that example. I'm going to be repeating that internally.
Oh yeah,
quite a lot. I can tell you that.
Well, it worked, hey, and I think that's also the thing, is sometimes it's the simple things that work. So right,
and it shows that even in especially in internal communications, you can be kind of creative with your strategies and your approaches. Really like that. Okay, I think, we can go ahead and go to rule number 3. For rule number 3, we have showcase your people. Now, Maria, you were already talking about this in the early stages about, communicating with your most important assets, your employees, and how, you guys approach that. So maybe you can kick us off with telling us what we mean about, or what we mean when we talk about showcasing your employees.
Sure. Yeah. So I think, the world has changed. I started working in internal comms a bit over 10 years ago. It was very still top down, and we're definitely moving away from that. And in the past couple of years, what I've seen really working is that, you showcase your people. Your employees don't necessarily always want to hear from the CEO or the leadership. So I think what's really important is that you remember that your job as a communicator is to figure out how to draft your message and how to make it relevant to people. And what better way to do that than with the people who others are going to identify with. So an example of that would be in my previous job, we were rolling out a new KPI framework, which was very complicated, global rollout. And we knew it was going to be very, very heavy and hard for people to manage. So what we did was we built an awareness campaign using one of the directors that everyone really likes and everyone knows is a bit funny, tongue in cheek. And so we created a whole campaign around these KPIs based on like a boat, and that you're releasing things on a boat. And so by making it super funny and showcasing him with his team, and also showcasing the bloopers of the video as a teaser, we were able to communicate something very heavy in a very fun, authentic way. And that got people feeling really confident and comfortable to ask questions, right? So because it come out as this funny way of communicating something that's quite scary, rather than sending them a 30-page PowerPoint on change management, we came out and said, hey, this is our director. He's pretty scared too, so you'd see him on the boat and he'd be like, this is going to be a rocky ride and all these things. So in between the messages, you're basically saying it's okay for you not to be okay about this. So that's one way you can showcase your people. Another, going back to the curry vouchers thing. So I see there's a question from Kate on that, on how we maintain the uptake. So yeah, the answer to your question, Kate, is yes, the curry vouchers work long-term because we had the adoption rates already. In order to continue engaging them, that's where we use things like the competitions, but also using the people in the plant. So we did highlights, we did videos from behind the scenes, and in every single way that you can, try to use your people. Another example is when we launched a new car, when I worked at Nissan, what we did was we created a karaoke video series where we had different leaders and then different people from sales, marketing, etc., sitting in a car, in the new car, and then they did karaoke where they sang their favorite song and they talked about the USP of the car. And it's a great way of getting a ton of information across through different channels, but also through different mediums. So some was written, some was video. But I think the ultimate thing is here, what you want to see as an employee is what other employees want to see as well. So, yeah.
Maria, I have to say, there's two things that jump out to me there. First one is Sunderland. I don't know if you've seen the documentary on Netflix, but it's pretty good.
I have not.
And then number two, entertainment. Using entertainment as a marketer, that is such a big lesson that I've learned eventually in my career, which is, even this is a bit, maybe far off, but when you're trying to figure out what to put on a channel like social media, why are people there? Are they there to read, a 10-minute blog post, or are they taking a break at work? Are they looking to slack off a little bit, maybe? So what are you going to do about your content now that you know that? And entertainment is such a game changer. But to go back to the point, what I wanted to add to what you said is that, for one, I fully agree. But when it comes to showcasing your people, to me, it also means leveraging internal networks to cascade communications through your people. So, as an IC department, you can only do so much, but you are able to work with key influencers, identify who they are, work with them, and kind of empower them to cascade your key messages and help you communicate those key messages. And I think it's funny because it's a copywriting workshop, but when we're putting these together, it was kind of impossible to ignore point 2, right? Channels and content types, video, text, images, and then the fact that communications is not top down so much anymore, like you highlighted as well, Maria.
Yeah, and if I can just build on that, Bruno, the absolutely key word in what you said was entertainment. I know a lot of internal communicators be like, yes, but we're serious business people, and that our stakeholders won't like it if we're too funny or we're too informal. And there is a time and a place for kind of very serious tone. But the reason why entertainment is such an important word for me is that human beings have evolved to make sense of their surroundings through stories. And every so often you hear about, storytelling in business, and leaders kind of go, oh, we're not sure about that. But people love stories. There's a reason why Netflix and Amazon Prime have become so popular. There's a reason why movies and theatre and literature is such a big part of people's lives, because people make sense of the world around them through stories. People want to know about other people. Stories have characters, and things happen to those characters, and then there is a resolution to whatever the problem was that character faced. So if you can find a way to use those tools and use those techniques in your writing, then you will find that your messages are a lot stickier and a lot more memorable. And so the other thing that I think really resonates with this idea about showcasing people is partly stories as part of the internal communicator's craft, but also remembering that when people come to work, they want to be part of a community. They want to feel like they are part of something bigger than themselves. And if you can showcase their peers, if you can tell stories about people who are at a similar level to them, who have had similar experiences, you really strengthen those bonds kind of on the horizontal level, rather than just kind of the top down, here's a message from the CEO, kind of going out vertically. It's about creating that sense of community, and that's why showcasing the people is really important.
Yeah,
that's really good. Like the idea that stories have characters, and your people are those characters, and that storytelling, of course, a great way to grab attention. So really love that. I think we can go ahead and keep moving. Go ahead to rule number 4, and this one initially reads script in colloquialisms. And if you're read the sentence, you might notice that we are actually breaking this rule by writing it in this fashion. So actually what you should be doing is writing in everyday language, writing to be understood. It's so important when you're writing any kind of message to anybody that they actually understand what you're writing. Bruno, I don't know, maybe you want to go first on this one.
Sure. Yeah, scripting colloquialisms. I have no idea what that means. I have to stop and think. And then I kind of realized, oh yeah, it's write in everyday language, write like you talk. And that's exactly the point. And that's what initially the rule was called, write in everyday language. And we kind of came up with this because we thought it was funny. But the point here is that, for one, don't use abbreviations and I don't know, fancy words, acronyms. Like talk like you would in real life. Don't let your ego get in the way of you being understood and speaking, to the general audience. But I think also it's important to remember that when you are an expert in a subject, you very easily forget what it's like to not be an expert. So you may write something that to you it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple, but for someone who is not deep into that, it may not be. So when you're writing something, it's not a bad idea to, after you have your first draft, go back to it and kind of review and look for these types of things that you might be doing. What can you remove less is more, right? And actually, I'm gonna call Alex out on this one, because you were saying some things recently about this a little bit with relations to your job in product marketing.
Yeah. So something I like to, and I was talking about this on LinkedIn. Something that I like to do when writing is, if I've written something down, I think that would my parents understand what I'm trying to say? Some people call it the parent test. Some people call it the grandparent test. But anyway, making sure that your parents understand. I'm sorry if my family is tuning in, but sometimes I need to make things simple. But my example for and it just pays to kind of keep things simple. I, for example, used an example of an electric bike. So if I said that an electric bike is e-bike is a bicycle with an integrated electric motor that can be used for propulsion either through pedaling or via a throttle, would people understand that, or would they rather hear me say it's a motorized bike that helps you get where you're going faster and with less effort? So it's just kind of one of those is significantly easier to understand, even though they're kind of trying to convey the same thing. So yeah, I use that in my job definitely on a day-to-day basis. Also really interested to hear maybe Kathryn or Maria, do you guys have any good examples?
Oh gosh, I don't know about kind of good examples of it, but yeah, I mean, absolutely. The kind of, I've often sat down with stakeholders and said, right, imagine I'm your 10-year-old child. How would you explain that to me? And that they kind of suddenly look at me and they're like, oh yeah, okay. And so yeah, it's that the importance of don't assume understanding. I mean, particularly when you're getting through to things like financial performance or strategy or kind of that kind of stuff, which should be important to every employee. But for years at the beginning of my career, I mean, I couldn't figure out for the life of me what's a strategic objective, like metric, KPI. I mean, I was genuinely mystified for the first couple of years until I kind of, and it just came with experience. So there may be many employees like that who are just like, amortization, like what's it? So think through that. The 7-year-old test. I mean, if in doubt, 2 syllables max and no more than 15 words in a sentence. I mean, that would. So yeah, if you just kind of wanted one takeaway, I'd say kind of if you stick to that, your writing will be reasonably clear. But I mean, I think the final thing to say on that is really that making something look easy is a sign that you are really, really good at it. When you can make something complex look simple or sound simple, that's a real skill in copywriting. Anybody can make something sound complicated, but making it simple is a real skill. So it comes with time and it comes with practice, but keep it in mind.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. And I think as an IC person, it's also your role, especially when you're working with, let's say, senior stakeholders or leadership, to help identify why it's not always best to make yourself sound smarter. Because I think a lot of people do want to come off, this email is going to sound very professional. We're going to use all the synonyms. But people don't care. People don't want to hear you sound smart. They just want to understand. And I just wanted to add to what you said, Kathryn. You said, if in doubt, and I would like to say, if in doubt, don't. If you're ever in doubt, don't do it. Simple as that. Yeah. And then there's the pub test, which Kate just put in. Very good. Yeah. I love the pub test. Yeah.
I love
this. Giving that a like.
Yeah, people seem to have a lot of different examples. That the pub test. Will the MD understand this? Technical writing for an accountant. So there, of course, there are many ways to do it. And I think something that Maria, you said that you all really touched upon was we sometimes have this wish to come off as really sophisticated and an expert in our own fields, but that person that we're communicating with doesn't necessarily have that context. So it pays to kind of keep it simple, because if people don't understand what you're writing, you won't get your message across. I think we're good to go ahead and move to the last rule, if you guys are cool with that. So the last rule, this was an interesting one, and I know Bruno was already alluding to this on social media a while back. But the last rule reads head, heart, and hands. And I know when we had kind of these initial initial calls and we discussed our topics or the rules that we were going to cover, Kathryn, you were very excited and enthusiastic about this rule. So maybe you can lead us off on this one.
I would be delighted. So it's funny, I've just kind of, on the course of the call, I've realized that kind of the two that I kind of feel most strongly about are the ones that actually have nothing to do with the act of writing anything. It's all about the thinking that you do before you even, open Word. But the reason why this is so important is that I feel that for internal communicators to really be strategic in the value that they add, every single piece of communication that we put out, whether it's a poster, a flyer, an internal social media post, an email, whatever it is, it's got to change something. It's either got to tell people something that they didn't already know, or it's got to alter their emotional state in some way, or it's got to change their behavior. And if it doesn't do any of those things, so the best ones will do all three. But if it doesn't do any of those things, then you've got to really ask the question, well, like, why am I doing it? There's no clear value if it doesn't change anything. So the way that I would always approach writing something is kind of that, you'd like kind of Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is start with the end in mind and work backwards. So, like, what is it that I need people to? The other name for the head, heart, hands model is, you may use know, feel, do, which is another very common kind of 3-word framework. So, for every piece of writing is, what do I want them to know? How do I want them to feel? And what do I want them to do afterwards? And then, when you've got that output for your message in mind, you can then start crafting it in a way that meets that ultimate objective, rather than if you start with I've got to write an announcement about a product launch. I mean, you can do it and there will be an output, but will it actually have an effect? Maybe not. And that also leads on, the idea of head, heart, and hands also speaks to the content that you need to include. So you've got to speak to their heads with data, with facts. You've got to speak to their kind of rational, to the rational part of the employee. You've also got to speak to their emotion, to their feelings, and you do that with language, and that's kind of a whole other copywriting workshop about how you do that most effectively. And then you've got to speak to their hands with one really clear call to action, and just no more than one. Just say one piece of content, one purpose, and just write. The next step that you need to take after reading this email is, click here, download this, do that, whatever it is, and make that really clear and end on that call to action. And then you get into topics around structure and flow and that kind of stuff, but always end with the call to action, always end with the what next, what do I do now? That's probably it.
Yeah, I love that. Is Bruno, when originally me and Bruno started working together, he would get on me if I had too many calls to action in my messages, because if you have 2 calls to action, you'll end up getting no action. So really making sure that it's clear and concise, and everybody knows what needs to happen next. Maria, Bruno, any?
Yeah, I sorry, Maria, maybe you want to go first?
I was just going to say, so I think what's also important here is to remember that some people will, let's say, veer towards being engaged via the head, while others will be engaged via the heart, right? So someone like me, I am very big on storytelling. If someone shows me a picture of a cat and tells me a story, I'm done, I'm going to adopt that cat. Where someone else needs data behind it to tell them why it's a good idea to adopt this cat. So what I mean is, you've got different types of people, and there's different ways for you to get them to do what you would like them to do. So the call to action will be the same, but the way you do that will be different. And that's why it's good to have both, because that way you address everyone's needs.
And you also get to address the people who have made a decision for emotional reasons, but then want data to justify it. You cover all the bases.
Exactly.
Yeah. I really like this rule, and it's something that I try to apply, obviously, all the copywriting that I do. And maybe one thing that could be helpful is to maybe give an example of what that would actually look like. So if you think about this session that we are in right now, some of the things that we did during the promotion to try to address the head, the heart, and the hands. So if you're writing something a bit more long form, where you have the privilege, I guess, of being able to address them separately on different sentences, then great, right? So like you could address the head about this session by saying something like 2 out of 3 people don't read internal emails. That's a stat that we used on the emails and landing pages and social media posts about this session, right? That's addressing the head. For the heart, I think we said something like, we used a lot of 800 of your peers are already joining this session. Will you? So again, and the heart is tricky because it doesn't necessarily have to be a love, happy type of emotion, but it can be like fear of missing out, which is a little bit, if that many people are attending that, maybe I should pay attention and I don't want to be left out. So, and then for the hands, obviously, the first thing that comes to mind is the CTA. What the call to action, what you want them to do. But then Alex actually, like we were talking about this earlier today, actually, and he said to me, the way I see it, it would be a sentence like, and we use this to promote the session, which was, you leave the session with 5 golden rules you can apply every day at work. We even said things like, you can put it on a sticky note or whatever, but it's, very a more concrete sentence on what are you going to take away, a concrete takeaway from the session. Again, I think the call to action is the primary thing, but that's an example of how you would use that in a scenario like this session. But then the other level to it is, how do you, and I think this is where you really get your copywriting head out, which is, how do you get cover 2 in one sentence? That's not so hard to do. How do you cover all 3 in one, concise sentence? That's where the magic is, I think. And if sometimes you will have more characters to work with. Sometimes it's going to be shorter. But practicing being able to do that, I think it's super helpful. But to Maria's point, different people are going to react to the head, the heart, the hands. So it's important that you cover all of them.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get really good at it, look at kind of the ads that you see running in sort of newspapers or magazines, fundraising for charities. They are brilliant at it, and they, typically they will follow the structure, and it will be really powerful. It will say, this many square meters of rainforest burn down every day, which is open with a fact, a piece of data, and then they will probably follow up, and there may be kind of it's all right, I don't mean to sound glib about this, but for example, they would say this here's your fact, and then they would typically follow it up, and there will be a picture of kind of a very cute sloth in the tree, and the tree's on fire, and that's really designed to kind of make you go, oh my gosh, that's terrible. And then the next line will be, text sloth to this number to donate £50 or whatever it is. And so it's just go and read some of those ads and see, because they are super effective. That's exactly what they're designed to, and see if you can look and unpick some of the tricks and techniques that they use.
Perfect. I love it. That's
such a good point, Kathryn. Actually,
keep going.
Can you guys hear me? Is my internet being
we're
mean to
there.
me again? But that's a really good tip. And the thing about that is that back in the day, 30 years, 40 years ago, there was no technology like there is today for internal communicators, for marketers, where you can get your message in front of the right person. Like, the technology does the targeting for you. You can get, which means as a copywriter, your job is a bit easier already. But if you look at those old ads, the message was the targeting. The headline, on top of delivering the message, it has to do the targeting for you. It has to catch the attention of the right person, the right people. So I think that's a brilliant advice. Go back and look at some of those, because the skills that some of the greats of that era had is pretty impressive. And we're lucky. Maybe technology is spoiling us a little bit, but it would be great to go back to rely a little bit, less on that, or maybe use that, but develop those skills and combine them. That would be pretty magical.
Right. All right. Well, I think with that we can go ahead and kind of move into Q&A. I know I promised 15 minutes. We only have 5 minutes now. We did take pick some questions up along the way. You can keep submitting them. We already have so many in here that we probably won't get to all of them, but maybe we can follow up with some communications or content later on about these. One that I wanted to pick out first is. And this is because I saw this question actually in kind of the same question written two different ways. How do you accommodate local language and nuance in the message? From Daniel, and then Laura said everyday language, but what does that mean when you have multiple languages in the company? So when we talked about multi-generational, how about multilingual workforces? How do you approach that? Anybody, now it's free for all. Anybody can go.
So I think what's really important in terms of language and let's say the localization is that you really keep the tone of voice and the messaging from, let's say, global the same, but then you let that local flair be put in. So you use a global strategy. So if you have some messages on a global level that have been signed off, then in the local context, you get to rework that to make sure that it's authentic for your audience, that it plays on the right, let's say, points that are relevant for that country and that locale. So I think it's really about taking the global and adapting it. That would be my suggestion. And always don't try to just take a global strategy and just translate the language and say, okay, we're good to go, because that's never going to work. And take the cultural aspects into it as well. So the way that a person in Indonesia is going to consume content is going to be very different from someone in Russia. Even the stakeholders that you use, the people you have driving these messages will differentiate between countries and locales. So I would really think that you need to think about it on a local level.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, it varies from company to company how they handle this. Some companies may have legal restrictions that importantly, they usually work in English, but for legal reasons, it has to be translated. So for large companies working in different languages, it may be that actually everything goes through local translators and is managed locally. And if you're in that position, then you're quite fortunate. But if, for example, you are an internal communicator at a medium-sized company, which is globally dispersed, your working language is English, then, and you need a practical way to accommodate that, is really, I would take a draft of a message and I would build a relationship with, there may be an internal comms manager in another location, or there may just be somebody who you trust and who is pretty much bilingual, and actually just say to them, look, before I send this out, can you review this? Would a non-native English speaker understand this? Which goes back to the point of being kind of as clear and as simple and as accessible as you can in your writing. But also to kind of say, to be sensitive to the cultural stuff, is like, actually, does this word mean the same thing in Australia as it does in the UK, for example? Or are there any elephant traps here that we're likely to fall into? So just build a couple of relationships with people in different markets, different locations, and kind of recruit them to the cause to make sure that at least you don't come unstuck with anything.
Sounds super good.
I
keep going.
Yeah, just real quick, I agree. I mean, to summarize, if you have the budget to give local teams the tech and the information that they need to act as communicators locally, then that's ideal.
Yeah.
I want to pick out one more question. I know this means we're going to probably go a little over time, but let's try to do it quick. This is a really, upvoted and liked question by Rachel. How would you engage with a furloughed workforce who are very low on motivation? Our keeping in touch type emails and CEO updates have very poor open rates. So apparently there's like a need to grab attention with this furloughed workforce. How would you guys approach that?
I can have a stab at it. So for this particular furloughed workforce, I would assume that actually there is a massive appetite for reassurance. So look, it depends on the company. It depends on the situation of the company. Do they think that the company's about to go out of business, for example, and through that lens of your particular, were they disengaged and demotivated to begin with, in which case you've got a slightly different problem to solve. But if it's specifically about keeping in touch with a furloughed workforce, I am sure that furloughed workforce has a massive appetite for certain kinds of information. They want to know, does the company have a future? They want to know, like, what is going to happen to my job? They want to know what this company is going to do to support me through this period. It may be that the kind of like, actually, what's going to happen? So I think it's really the way to re-engage that group is to speak really specifically and really clearly to their fears, their worries, their concerns, their hopes, and reassure them that the company is of what they're doing for them, and just be as clear as you can, be as kind as you can. And there will always be people who are like, well, I'm on furlough, I don't need to worry about it. And you'll never get to 100% open rates on them, however good a copywriter you are. But really, by knowing what's on their minds and by speaking to those questions, you will either improve your open rates or you will help those people who are opening them.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think that's a really good point, Kathryn. And I would also question whether the CEO updates are exactly what these people want at the moment. Do they really want to be hearing from the CEO? Maybe not. So you may want to be looking at someone else to be doing this messaging, and much more targeted messaging from, let's say, the manager to that specific person, and then follow up with, let's say, some more corporate comms from the higher level leadership. But I think at the end of the day, that the CEO and someone who's sitting in this furlough, there's a huge disconnect there, right? So it might be very hard for that person to relate to what they're being told.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. I think with that, I know we're already 1 minute past time. It's okay to head on to our closing remarks. But before we do that, I would be remiss if I didn't let everybody know that our next live session is right around the corner. The Great Comms Debate is back for round 4. We're going to be having Rachel Miller, Rachel Thornton, and Steve Crescenzo join us for this one. So it's going to be pretty good, pretty good indeed. I will put a link on your screen in just a bit. And don't worry, if you click on this link, it won't take you out. You'll be able to hear our closing remarks as well. There we go. And sorry, this is a little clunky. And yeah, with that, I'd like to thank everybody. And yes, we did get a guest appearance by somebody in Maria's background.
My husband. It's not my cat. It's my husband.
At the very end, we did it. Thank you guys so much for joining us for this session. Thank you, everybody that dialed in, had questions, engaged with us. It was really great to have you all. If you want to get in touch with any of us, contact information is on the screen. And of course, if you want to find out how Smarp can help you communicate with a global dispersed workforce, for example, stuff that we talked about today, feel free to get in touch as well. We provide an employee app that really gets the job done. Wink. That's weird. Guys, any last notes? Any words?
You did well, Alex. You did well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any words?
I just want to thank. I want to thank everybody who called in. This was a lot of fun. There are so many questions. I wish we had time to answer them all. Maybe we'll do something about them as a follow-up. And of course, thank you, Maria and Kathryn, for working through these golden rules with me. And I'm gonna go ahead and write them on a sticky note and keep them by my side.
I'll follow up with a post on social media to make sure that he actually does that.
Cool. Yeah. Make sure you take a picture of the sticky notes. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Kathryn, Maria, any last words of wisdom? Before we sign off?
Just to say thanks very much. I've really enjoyed this, and I'm seeing some nice comments popping up in the questions box, which is really, really great to see. But keep in touch, and I would happy to answer any questions or anything else that comes off the back of this. Just get in touch.
Yeah, same for me. It was a really, really interesting, insightful session. I could probably go for another 2 hours. So thank you for inviting us, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
And please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions, or if you want to talk about cats. Reach out.
There we go. We never saw the cat. We never.
No, never did. She's on my Instagram. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you guys so much. And we'll see everybody at the next one.
See you next
Thank
time.
you. Bye-bye.